All right, episode 29 with Michael Hix. Michael's from Texas, incredible entertainer, great singer, and we had him up here at our theater, the Walters Theater, a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and probably one of the best shows we've ever had in. It was fantastic. He's such a great entertainer, so much fun, and people were just shocked and enjoyed everything he's done. So we had a little phone call, and we did an interview and had a great conversation. So once again, Michael Hix. All right, we're rolling. We're here with Michael Hix, live from Texas. Are you in the Dallas area?
Yeah, we live right in between Dallas and Fort Worth, so in Arlington.
Yeah.
You know, that's where the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, Six Flags, all the major, I guess, entertainment venue or entertainment areas right here in Arlington. So yeah, we love it.
Yeah, I guess. So we met a few years ago. You came up and performed here at the Walters Theater, and probably one of the best shows we've ever had at the theater, and probably one of the best entertainers I've ever watched. It just amazing. And I watched your video that we had taped from the show. I just kind of keep a record of all the shows here, and I look back, and you did a whole Canadian tribute.
I had to.
I know.
It was my first time ever performed there in Canada. I had to do a Canadian tribute.
It was so great when you went to Bieber for a while. And I watched the video, and you pulled your pants, sort of down to that kind of, young hipster kind of, it doesn't sound right. You got to watch the video to know what I'm talking about.
Oh, no. I love it.
Yeah, it was great. I laughed.
People are going to, what type of show does this guy do?
I know.
Pulling your pants down and doing Justin Bieber routine.
But it was awesome. But,
and that's why it was so entertaining.
Yeah.
And I did some, talk about awkward, went from, if I can remember right, we did some, Michael Bublé, some Shania Twain, Justin Bieber, some Anne Murray.
Celine.
Yeah, and I think it was all Celine Dion, that's right. I think I even hit my chest so hard I lost my voice for a little while doing my Celine impersonation. That was fun.
Yeah, it's really great. So, I've obviously been following your career on Instagram and Facebook and all that great stuff, and we've ran into each other a few times, and I thought you'd be a great guest, and I'm sure people would love to hear more about you, and I'm also super interested as well. But so let's go back kind of to the beginning. You born in Texas? You're a Texas boy, actually?
I was not born in Texas. I was born in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
So I was actually born in Oklahoma. But my parents, we moved to Texas whenever I think I was one. So pretty much, we lived in the panhandle of Texas in Amarillo. So moved to Amarillo when I was 1 year old. And that's just Texas's home. I guess my dad had a job that kept him in Oklahoma City or in Moore, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And then I think, moved to Kansas City for a couple of months and then ended up settling back in Amarillo when I was 1 year old.
And
so Amarillo, born and raised, I say born and raised. That was home for over 22, 23 years.
Oh, wow. So as far as getting into singing and into music, what was your kind of first foray into the music industry as a young kid? Were you singing young?
Oh, yeah. Well, I grew up in a musical family. As far as getting interested in music and being, getting myself accustomed to live performance, my granddad used to play with Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys.
Oh, really?
So
what did he play?
At the time, yeah. He played piano. Now, he was never a full-time player.
Yeah.
But if they'd come through town, or if they'd ever, if they were doing some of their festivals, my granddad would either go and sit in and play with them, or they would, they'd always come over to their house. My grandparents, they'd always have the jam sessions, is what they used to call. So I remember people showing up at my grandparents' house, to bring their instruments, and my grandmother would make a lot of food, and people would come over and they'd have a jam session in my granddad's music room. There'd probably be anywhere from 7, 8, 9 10 musicians just pile up there in the music room, drop off their gear, and start playing and eating food and then going on. So I was really used to that for a while. My mom sang, my aunt sang, my grandmother sang, and they just had several, literally a jam session.
Yeah.
But I was really kind of too young at the time. I enjoyed it, but I was too young to really truly appreciate it. I think I was, in 95, I was maybe 13, 14 when my granddad passed away.
Yeah.
And so I really, go back and I've got a bunch of these old VHS tapes of some of those jam sessions. And it's awesome to watch them now, very nostalgic, and you can kind of really see the talent of all the players that are in the rooms. But so I kind of grew up with that. But as far as me personally singing, I guess like a lot of other singers, I grew up singing in my church. I was 7 years old. I grew up in the Church of Christ, which we are a cappella, non-instruments or no instruments, but just congregational singing. So at the age of 7, I was leading the singing in my church. My granddad was a deacon, and my uncle was an elder, and my dad was, he would teach Bible study and also teach classes, and my entire family was really active in our church. So I was kind of made to be active in my church at a young age. So 7 years old, leading singing, and that's kind of where I got my start.
So
kind of got the bug to start performing.
So did you feel like it was kind of at an early age something that you really wanted to do? I mean, I know when I was young, when I started playing and performing, and I started at the age of 4, so really young. But I kind of had an idea really young that this is what I wanted to do. Was that like that for you, or is it just something that you were doing?
Oh no, I got the bug, definitely. No, and of course in a different atmosphere in church, singing. Yeah. But I didn't know maybe 100% if I wanted to sing. I just knew I loved being in front of people.
Yeah.
I loved, and what I always called performing. I loved being in front of people. So it didn't matter if I was singing or if I was dancing or just trying to get attention. As a kid, being the youngest and being the only boy in my family, trying to always fight for attention from the girls. But I loved being in front of an audience. So I knew that, and it probably wasn't until I started doing more of it that I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be my career path.
Yeah. Did you were you singing in school at all? Was there anything opportunity there? Yeah.
Sang in school. Yeah. Of course, in where I grew up, all throughout middle school, elementary school, middle school, high school, I took choir, but it wasn't. I probably just want to say more middle school. I wanted to be. Music was always a part of my life. Singing was always a part of my life. Yeah. But I wanted to be an actor. I started watching. That's kind of what I wanted to do. But I was still doing, music and choir and singing, and but I wanted to be the next Jim Carrey. That was kind of what I wanted to do. Yeah. So I started pursuing a lot more theater, which always kept me on stage. So that performing still allowed it to happen. And it wasn't until I got into, I think, 14, 15 years old. I was in high school. Put together my first band, and then I kind of started realizing, hey, you can mix a lot of your comedy and your acting and your dancing and your theater stuff along into your music, into your performance, and you just instead of just being just a musician, now you've got a show.
Yeah. So what was that like when you were 14, putting a band together for the first time? You must have been kind of popular at school with your own band.
With the ladies.
Yeah.
That's 14. That's what you're trying to do. I think that's the only reason I had it. We started off, it was just me. I had and two good buddies. I sang. One of them played the drums. Another one played the guitar. And we'd just go over to his house and just, fool around, just be silly, play Beatles tunes and play songs that, we always liked.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until, I guess, we found 3 other buddies that one played the bass, another guy sang, and then another guy played guitar. So the 6 of us, we just put together this band, and we played coffee shops and little restaurants. I mean, there's not, as a 14 and 15-year-old, there's really not too many places, especially in Amarillo, Texas, there in the Bible Belt, of where you can play as a 14-year-old kid. We played school talent shows and little places here and there, or we just set up in somebody's garage and invite our friends to come over and watch us play. So, but no, we loved it.
I bet that would be fun. So you finished up high school, and where did you find yourself at that point?
Really, I was still graduated from Amarillo High in 2000, and a couple of my buddies that were in our first band, some of them moved off and went to college. I knew at that point that I wanted to be a performer. I wanted to pursue entertainment in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So I actually was offered a couple of scholarships to go to school. Somebody actually offered me a scholarship to be an attorney and said, I say a scholarship to be an attorney, but to go to law school.
Wow.
And they said, if you go to law school and come back, we'll have a spot for you at our firm. But I just didn't want to do that. To me, that wasn't a path that I've really wanted to pursue. So I just stayed at home, and I went to our junior college, Amarillo College, stayed there for about 2 years.
Yeah.
But the rest of my guys from my band that stayed there, we just formed one of the other singers, one of my best friends, we grew up together. He jumped from singing to playing drums. And so we then became a 4-piece as opposed to 6-piece. So we were there playing, and we were stupid enough that not only were we playing every single weekend somewhere, but we were also taking the exact same classes in school. So we never got anything done because we were the house band. This is 2000. So I was 18 years old, and we were the house band at a biker bar in Amarillo, Texas. This is dead serious. You can't make this up. It was ridiculous. And I mean, I'm skinny by nature, but at this time, I mean, I looked ridiculous. I was 18, looked like a beanpole. We're at a biker bar. I'm wearing leopard pants, a white tank top, a cowboy hat, and black boots. And this was Thursday night.
Yeah.
And we were playing stuff like, Leonard Skinner and George Thorogood, and we'd play Metallica. And at the time, I think we played popular stuff like Creed was popular, Nickelback was going on, but it was so funny is because here we are 18. They're putting X's on our hands every Thursday when we walk in. And this biker bar bikers would come in, and you would think these would be some of the most dangerous and nasty, bikers. But they loved us. They treated us like we were their sons, and like we were their kids. Yeah. And one of the funniest stories, because I'm a family person, and we go to church with my entire family every Sunday, and after church we'd go and eat lunch, and then we'd all go back to church that evening, and then I'll go out and eat dinner. Well, one Sunday after church, me and my entire family and my grandmother, we went to a place to go eat lunch, and then all of a sudden I look up, and here comes a whole group of gang called the Banditos, and these are some bad dudes. Yeah. But I recognize them because of their jackets and everything else. There's probably about 20 of them. And they walk in, and I'm sitting down right next to my grandmother, and I see him come through. And this one guy comes up to me and picks me up. He's like, Michael Hix, you son, how you doing, buddy? We love you this past week. You're incredible. The look on my grandmother's face was like she was completely mortified. You would have thought, of course, I'm high-fiving them all. You'd have thought I was a member of the gang. And then my entire family just out of church is looking up at me and all these bikers.
That's fantastic.
I felt like you remember when Pee Wee Herman goes into the biker bar. That's kind of how I felt on that afternoon. So it was funny.
I bet.
So that was kind of, we were right out of high school and college. We were playing.
What were you taking in college?
To school. I was mostly going just at the time just general studies. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't. And some of the programs that they had at the college that I was going, they didn't really have a legitimate music program or theater program. Yeah. I was taking music and theater classes, but I was not actually pursuing a degree in either one of those fields. I took a lot of theater classes. I took a lot of speech and drama classes. I took opera lessons just to try to expand my range vocally. And so, but I was just going general studies.
Yeah, it makes
And
sense.
at the time, aside from just doing music, I was also working at a bank right out of college, or right out of high school. My mom and dad were like, all right, well, if you're going to stay at home and go to school and play, or, and play in the band, you got to get a job. So I was working at a bank as a teller at the same time. So 2000, 2001, we're rocking and rolling.
The bikers come in when you're a teller. That would have been a good story, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that'd have been great. Yeah, give me all your money. I'm kidding.
Hey, Michael.
Exactly. Hey. No, that would have been great.
Yeah, let this guy go.
Yeah, he's fine. He's with me.
That's great. So, you in college and you're playing in biker bars and having a lot of fun. And so you must have had to take a step from there, or was your next kind of adventure after that?
Yeah, well, things really started as just a band. We were given a lot of really cool opportunities. And to be honest with you, we weren't that good. I mean, we really weren't. I think a lot of it had to do with we knew how to judge a crowd and read a crowd.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we were okay, but because of us having such a good following and a good crowd reaction, we started doing some pretty big shows. We were playing, like we opened up for Sugar Ray, and we opened up, which was, in the 90s, a pop group.
Yeah.
We opened up for the first band we ever opened up for was Quiet Riot.
Oh, wow.
And this was in at the corn. It's funny to say, at the Cornstalk Festival in Guymon, Oklahoma.
Wow.
It was, and here I am again wearing my leopard. Actually, I think I might have had my black, which is so silly. They were probably my mom's black leather pants and a tight black shirt. Man, I bet I looked like just a skeleton wrapped in electrical tape. And everything I was wearing, I probably looked ridiculous. And that's what made it so funny, is that when we started playing and started doing a bunch of these shows and opening up for these bigger groups, because at first my mom and dad, they wanted me to always pursue my dreams, but they were not happy with me playing at a lot of the bars and the clubs and some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with them. And that wasn't necessarily the place that I wanted to be, but I also understood that, hey, you got to play where you can get to work. You got to play where you got to play.
Yeah.
And they never really saw that. But then when they started seeing, okay, he's taking this and kind of doing something with it, and they're getting bigger shows, and they're starting to play with a lot of these acts. My dad came up to me one time, and he said, because he knew what I was wearing, and or I'd wear jeans and a t-shirt, whatever. And he came up to me and dead serious. He goes, son, and my dad is not a musician at all.
Yeah.
But he came up to me just as serious as he could be. He goes, I think it's time you started dressing a little bit more sexy. When you're doing these shows, you need to, dress sexy, more like maybe Tom Jones. And if you only knew how weird it was to have your dad, who played football for San Diego State University and who's in the medical field, come up to you and put his arm around you and tell you, son, you need to start dressing more sexy like Tom Jones. Talk about funny. I still razz my dad to that every day. Every time he comes to a show, if mom and dad are at a show, I always bring that up in concert because it makes it for a funny story.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So we started playing, doing
ahead.
that type of stuff with bigger groups. Oh, no, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's all right. Yeah, that's interesting, opening up for Quiet Riot. And so you were still fairly heavy, or were you just kind of really diverse and you can kind of do a little bit of everything, but you just kind of more in the heavy rock and roll?
No, we were kind of diverse. We were playing everything. And of course we had some of our original tunes that we were doing that we fiddled around and put together. And we would do, whenever we were doing some of those bigger shows, we'd do more of our originals. But then as far as covers, we were covering everything from AC/DC to, NSYNC. We were just really trying to be diverse and base what we were playing off of the crowd. And I felt that kind of gave me an edge and has given me an edge because I learned a lot even back whenever, brand new and starting out. It kind of allowed me an opportunity to read a crowd and figure out, okay, when you're putting together a show or when you're doing a show, know your audience, and you can make it work if, 9 times out of 10, if you know who you're playing for. And you win the crowd. That's what they always said in the movie Gladiator. You win the crowd, you win your freedom.
Yeah. Well,
so win the crowd.
It's an important lesson in knowing that early in your career. That's a huge lesson to learn. There's so many people that are so stuck in wanting to do just what they want to do, and that's it. So if you go out and you can look at the crowd and realize, well, this crowd's not really going to dig this type of music. Maybe they're going to go for this. It's only a win situation for you. I think you can get to a certain point where you just have to say, well, this is who I am, is what I do. But at the beginning stages, especially, and actually, I've performed with lots of groups, and you go out and you look at the set list and you realize where you're playing, and it's like, why are you doing that song, or why are you starting with that one, or why are you going to offend people right away, or it's just not going to go well, and it doesn't, and they they just stupid crowd or whatever, and they blame it on them. It's like no, it's you didn't look at things the right way, and it's super, super important.
Well, I agree 100% with you, and if there's, and I mean, you hit it right on the head. There's several musicians, singers, songwriters, performers, whatever, that everybody gets stuck in that rut of, well, I just want to do the stuff I want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't have a crowd, if you're just doing what you want to do, and if you don't have a crowd and they're not buying into it, well, then you're not really making any money or doing, it depends. A lot of it depends on somebody's personal goals. But for me, people say, oh, that may be a cop-out, that, oh, you only do things for the crowd. No, I just try to be smart and book a show based off of my demographic, my audience, where I'm at.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it gives me more longevity.
Yeah, for sure.
It keeps me working, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, there's a lot of groups that, maybe have their own style and they want to stick to it. But there are songs within their own style that they could lay out the show better with, even when you're restricted to what you want to do, you may go and look at the crowd. Maybe it's a bit of an older crowd, so you don't want to go out and nail them with the hardest stuff first, or maybe ease into it a little bit. And there's even with, a limited, set list, that you can still juggle things around and make it adjust for the crowd. So, but yeah, you can, that's early lessons, and probably, the places you were playing, the gigs you were doing, really taught some really great lessons. And it's funny when you're young and performing 14, 15, you don't really realize what you're learning at the time. You're just adapting and trying to make the crowd like what you're doing, but you're actually learning lifelong lessons at that time period. It sticks with you.
No, definitely. So that's kind of what we would do whenever we'd go out and we'd play for a lot of these groups. And then as we kept going forward, we were doing some of our original stuff, which our original music at the time was very pop. It was, kind of, I'll call it pop rock, very, Matchbox 20, Hootie and the Blowfish, very along more of that style type music. So it was great. And then we finally got to a point to where we were playing a lot, and we were traveling. We were playing around the region, doing a lot of stuff in Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. So it was like, man, this is great. So I ended up, dropping out of a lot of my classes at Amarillo College, and so did my buddies, because we were all taking the same classes together, which was stupid.
Yeah.
But, we started playing, and then finally it kind of got to a point, and this is, I guess, a great tie-in to what we were just talking about, the other guys in the band, that they wanted to go more of a route of all original project. Just they wanted to move away and do an all original project. And at first I kind of toyed with the idea, but I didn't really think, for me personally, it wasn't the direction that I wanted to go at the time. So we kind of parted ways. They kept playing a little bit, and I went on and started doing my own thing. I ended up moving from Amarillo, I moved to Houston because that's where my mom and dad were living at the time.
Yeah.
So I went down there on a whim. So that kind of closed the door on that particular chapter as far as music. But I ended up moving to Houston because I auditioned for a television show. And this was in, I want to say 2002. I auditioned for a television show. This was back when all the American Idol just came out. And I think it was, I mean, aside from Star Search, but American Idol, that was the hot thing. So every local news channel or every, local television station was having their own American Idol search or whatever. So I went down to Houston and I ended up auditioning for their version, which was called Give Me the Mic. And Houston here in Texas is, I think, one of the largest city in Texas. I still think so. I think Houston's maybe 3rd or 4th largest city in the whole country.
Yeah.
So I thought, all right, let's go out in here and do this and try this. So ended up auditioning for the show, and the difference between this show and American Idol's, there was no age limit for this particular show. So I think there was over, around 1,000 or 2,000 people that auditioned for it.
Wow.
And I made it in the top 30.
Yeah.
And then they did it. They had, they very similar. They had their 3 judges. They had the host. And so you perform. And I ended up making to the top 5, and I think came in second.
Awesome.
Came in second, yeah. And so, because of doing that, it allowed me an opportunity to open up for Cher.
Wow.
And I did that. That was in Houston at the Woodlands Pavilion.
Yeah.
And this was in, I want to say 2002. So that was a really cool experience. So that's whenever I was in Houston at the time. I really wasn't going to school. I think I took a couple of online courses whenever I was in Houston.
Yeah.
But I was kind of doing some soul searching. I was doing some singing, taking the gentleman that was one of the judges on this show that I auditioned for. We started talking, and he was a vocal coach, a guy by the name of Tom McKinney. And he had worked with several at the time. I think he just got done working with Beyonce and her sister.
Yeah.
And then he had worked with several other people in the area in Houston. And so I started talking with him, and I said, I'd like to get in and start taking lessons. So I go see him once a week and did that for, at least 9-10 months.
Yeah.
And really just trying to perfect my craft as far as singing-wise. And he, at the time, told me, of course, so from the television show, I would occasionally go back because my band from Amarillo, they'd call me and say, hey, why don't we come back and do a couple of shows. So I would go back and do some shows with them. But it wasn't until Tom, at one of our vocal lessons, he said to me, he goes, well, Michael, because I was doing still a lot of, pop music.
Yeah.
It's funny, it came up, my grandpa played Western swing. I loved all type of music. My influences, my sister and my cousins, they influenced me because they were always listening to like Michael Jackson, and they were listening to a lot of the pop stuff.
Yeah.
But then growing up, I found the Beatles and Elvis and James Brown and the Temptations, everything Motown, everything rock and roll from my parents. So I just grew up, I loved all type of music.
Yeah.
But Tom McKinney said there's a venue in Arlington, Texas, known as the Johnny High Country Music Review. And he goes, have you ever heard of it? I said, I have no clue. He goes, well, I try to send a bunch of my students down there to go perform because it's a place where so many people have gotten their start, and it's just a great platform to get constant work.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm not really a country singer, but I'll check it out. And the venue, it was the guy that owned it was a gentleman by the name of Johnny High. And he created this show in 1974, kind of along the lines of a Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
To where he had his regulars that would perform every Saturday night. Then he'd always bring in some guests that would come on and perform on the show. And I want to say like Kelly Clarkson sang there. Miranda Lambert sang there. I was trying to think. She just won the Grammys. Good Night Nurse. I cannot even think of her name right now to save my life. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, Steve Holy had sang there. A couple of guys from Diamond Rio had performed there. I mean, there was kind of a list. Boxcar Willie was a regular on the show. Shoji Chibuchi had been on the show for years.
Yeah.
And these are, people from in any walks of the country music, whether they be out in Branson or out in Nashville or Pigeon Forge or any of these places. a lot of them, Johnny gave them their start.
Wow.
So I felt like, okay. And I think at the time they just had a competition that Steve Holy, who was, I think he was with Curb Records, he had won their first competition, and a guy by the name of Scott Hoying, who is also a student of Tom's, he had just won one of their vocal competitions that they had at Johnny's as well. And if that name doesn't ring a bell, Scott Hoying is now, he's one of the front people for Pentatonics.
Oh, wow.
He's the tall, blonde-headed guy. So anyway, so I was like, okay, I'll go down there and check it out. So I went down to Arlington, auditioned for the show. Fortunately, I knew enough of 2 country songs that I could sing and get through it.
Yeah.
And I passed the audition. And I think what floored him more is because I'm sitting here singing Travis Tritt's version of Trouble,
yeah,
which originally for me, I wasn't much of a country guy, but I knew the song because it was, I think Jerry Chestnut wrote that and Elvis did it. So I was like, oh yeah, I like this. And Travis Tritt's version was more of a rockin' tune. So I was like, all right, sweet, I'll do this one. And then the very next track on my karaoke CD was John Michael Montgomery, Be My Baby Tonight. So just from practicing Trouble, I knew the first verse and chorus of Be My Baby Tonight.
Oh, yeah.
So fortunately, that's all that made me sing in the second one. But I got in there, and for my audition, I was dancing around and moonwalking and doing all my crazy stuff. And I think my judges had passed me because Johnny wasn't there at the time. They passed me because they're like, all right, Johnny's either going to love this kid or he's going to think this kid is sniffing glue. So I think it was kind of a shock to them, but that's kind of where my career went from I guess went to next was being on Johnny's show.
So how long did you do that for?
I auditioned, it would have been 2003. I was living in Houston. I ended up moving to Fort Worth, right here in the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area.
Yeah.
I moved here in 2003 because I wanted to get out of Houston. I really wasn't doing anything in Houston. So I moved here. I was still playing with my band in Amarillo from time to time, got a job, started performing on Johnny's in 2000. I was just as a guest, 2003, but then Johnny, when the first time he saw me, he gave me an open invitation and said, anytime you're in town, I want you here. So from around 2000, probably 2003, 2004, if I can remember, I started performing on his show every Friday and Saturday night.
Wow.
And so I started doing that every Friday and Saturday night from 2003 till 2013. I did that for 10 years.
Holy smokes, that's a long time.
Yeah, it was great. And talk about going from one thing to the other. 14, 15 years old, playing in a high school band, just graduating, going to be playing at clubs and playing for a group of, the average demographic was anywhere from 21 to 30, playing biker bars and all this crazy stuff, to now going to the Johnny High Country Music Review, to where the majority of Johnny's audience was that of an older crowd, because, you think of an Opry type crowd.
Yeah.
So the crowd was 65 plus, and it was a crowd that loved country music. So that was, I think, another great lesson for me, is because, all right, now I've got to totally flip my mindset, and now you're going to have to find new material and new music, and you're going to have to play to a younger, or I say not to a younger audience, but to an older audience.
Yeah.
So it kind of, first of all, being on a stage, not a club, but actually on a stage and performing every Friday and Saturday night. Plus, as I kind of progressed being on his show, Johnny, he gave me the opportunity to co-MC with him and his granddaughter. And then there'd be nights he'd just say, all right, why don't you do it? You just MC it.
Huh.
And then there'd be times to where Johnny would let me kind of help co-produce. His granddaughter and I, we would co-produce and we'd put together the shows and we'd start doing things. And then, all right, well, Michael, why don't you come up with another show idea? So Johnny kind of took me underneath his wing. And, as for me, just being on his show as a guest. And then I became a full-time, quote, quote, regular in 2006. He really did. He taught me, and I learned a lot from, not just from Johnny. Johnny was great to me in that regard, but they were people that had sang on that show for years, and several musicians. I met so many great people being a part of that show that really kind of shaped and formed, I guess, where I'm at now.
Did you in the show? Did you open up and start doing more rock and roll on the show, or did you stay in the country realm?
No, it was really funny because a gentleman, good buddy of mine, by the name of John Rutherford, who he's a singer-songwriter himself, and he's a country. I mean, country.
Yeah.
And Johnny High was talking with John Rutherford, and Johnny said, "I like the guy, but I don't know where to put him." And John Rutherford said, "Don't put him anywhere. He's entertaining as all get out. Just let him do his thing." So I was one of the few people that Johnny would allow me to just get out of the box. So yeah, I would do country music. Johnny would say, "Hey, well, why don't you do, working man blues? Or why don't you do," he would throw out some weird suggestions, and I'd say, "Okay, I'll do that one. But will you let me do, this James Brown tune? Or will you let me do," because I knew it was going to be an older audience, so I would, I'd throw in some tunes from the 50s, 60s, 70s that I knew that, all right, this crowd's they're going to like this. But Johnny would, he'd let me kind of go off the rails and do whatever. And then whenever he saw that it was getting over, my whatever songs that I was doing, he'd start letting me do my own shows. I think there's a few times that he'd just let me do an entire show by myself. And I did a Motown show there. The very first, I guess, showcase show that I did for Johnny. I just did groups of songs by artists that had influenced me throughout the years. So I started off with Elvis and then went into James Brown, then did some Michael Jackson and did some Frank Sinatra. I did some stuff that my grandfather wrote. But I went all over just to kind of say, this is all the music that I listened to throughout the years that have kind of shaped and molded me into what you get. And then he just kind of let me
do your thing,
do whatever I wanted to. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I think with a country crowd, I think there's always a misconception to some degree for some people that they think that people who like country music only like country music. And
yeah.
And you say, well, you can't do that. This is a country music crowd. It's like, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean they don't like anything else. And
oh yeah,
there's so many similarities, especially when you're doing the older stuff. But yeah, I found that, especially even producing shows here at our theater, and you kind of grew up thinking, okay, well, you can't do that because this is a country show. And it's like all of a sudden you do it, and people are like, oh yeah, that's awesome. They really love it. And like, okay, well,
oh yeah,
these, you kind of pigeonhole different styles of music, and I think there's certain style. I mean, I think there's a lot of classical fans out there who are pretty strict, and this is the only music that really is music. There are some of those strict fans, and there's probably country fans like that too, where the only thing that they think is great is country. But majority just, look at country music now. It's really turn into it's basically pop music.
Oh yeah, it's pop rock from the 70s is what to me it sounds like.
Yeah, it's like
you may have some of your traditionalists, like you'll have a Brad Paisley, or you'll have Mo Pitney, or you'll have some people that are if you listen to their music or their albums, you may still have some traditionals, but a majority of them, like your Blake Sheltons and your Luke Bryans and Miranda Lambert's, it's rock and roll.
Yeah, and some of it's funny because I listen to some of it now, and there's a lot of drum loops and all that stuff.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And I'm thinking, when I was producing some pop stuff in the late 90s and early 2000s, this was the stuff I was doing in the pop music back then. And now it's now just moved into country. And I'm thinking, well, this is not new. It's just reinvented into, or country just moved itself into that category.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So you obviously you got that being on that show was a huge part of what made you who you are now, I imagine. I mean, getting the opportunities to host the whole shows and having a regular gig like that every Friday and Saturday. That's
oh yeah. Well, and from that show also, it taught me a lot about just music itself. I play a little bit of piano by ear, and that's what kind of helps me when it comes to my individual writing and doing stuff. But I learned so much about actual music and playing and reading charts, and I learned a lot about working with musicians.
Yeah.
For being on that show, and okay, well, who's doing this and who's doing what? I just learned so much, and then aside from that, being a part of the show, I got to do some great shows open up and do some shows with some incredible artists. Got to open up for Mel Tillis.
Yeah.
I think opened up for Willie Nelson. Opened up for one of George Jones' last concert. I think we had him October of 2011. October. Yeah, it was either October of 2011. I think that was it. No, I'm so sorry. Ray Price was November of 2011. I got to do a show with Ray Price. 2011, got to do a show with George Jones, I believe. It had to have been 2011 or 12. When did he pass?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's right in that. Yeah, I don't remember the exact date now.
It was one of his. And then, got to do a show with Merle Haggard.
Yeah.
We got to do a show with Clint Black. There were so many different acts that we would book at the theater. And Johnny passed in 2010. So when Johnny passed away, we continued to do his show. That he passed away May of 2010, March of 2010.
Yeah.
And then his family stayed on through the end of that year, and then they bowed out. And then the gentleman that owned the theater, he wanted to continue to have the shows. So I became full-time producer, MC. So I took over the entire show after that, putting the shows together and making sure, booking the band and booking the singers, booking the performers. I was now doing it all.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, working with another gentleman at the time, we were bringing in other acts. Like we bring in the symphony, or we bring in like I just mentioned, Sarah Evans, we bring in Restless Heart, we bring in all these different acts, touring acts, Rick Springfield, and they'd come and play at our theater. And a lot of times I would either do an opening for them if they didn't have an opening act, but depending upon their contract, I'd do openings for them.
Yeah.
Or I'd come out and, work with those guys, and taught me doing that particular job, taught me to work with tour managers and taught me to work with writers and show me the different ins and outs of, that so many different people don't see as just a singer or just a musician. But I really do. I felt like being involved with that theater and Johnny High taught me just so much about the music business in general. It was a 10-year education that you can't get anyplace else. That's one of the things that I mentioned earlier about going to college, is that, yes, I thought I knew what I wanted to do. There weren't any classes. And I guarantee, to this day, I still feel like there's not a class 1 that I could have taken for 4 years, or a degree for 4 years that I could have gotten that would have given me the education that I got over the past 10 years for being at that theater.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. So when that finished up, were you out, besides performing there on the weekends, were you at that time still out doing your own shows and playing different places? Were you, or pretty strict?
Yeah.
Playing there?
No, I was. Johnny had always, whenever he was alive, he'd always wanted us to be at the theater whenever we could.
Yeah. Just
because if we were a quote quote regular, so I would try to stay pretty loyal to that particular show. However, as things started moving forward and I started building a name and a following for myself here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I started getting a lot of requests and a lot of appearances, or a lot of requests for me to perform in different theaters, different Opries, different shows. So it's probably, and that started happening around 2008, 9, somewhere in there. And so I started staying busy, of course, trying to be loyal to Johnny and his show.
Yeah.
But then as things started progressing, probably around 2011, 2012, I was getting more and more requests to be gone and to do my own shows. So I was kind of, for me working at the theater, I knew a bunch of the players, and so I'd put together my band, and I'd have all my charts, and I was doing a lot of shows. And then finally, it was May of 2013, I told the owner of the theater, I said, you know, if I wanted to stay here and continue to be the president of the theater and do these weekly shows, you know, I would, but it's not in my heart to be a gentleman that runs a theater. I've got to go out and pursue and kind of chase my dreams as a performer. I feel like it's a God-given talent, and if I don't use it, he's going to take it away, or find it to be used some other way. So like, I at least got to give it a shot. So I ended up, and Jenny, I married my wife in 2012, and so we finally just took the leap and said, you know what, we're going to go out on our own and try to do nothing but performing, see what happens. And we took a leap, and now that's all we do, just full time. We've got our own thing going on, and we travel all over and play and perform. And, for crying out loud, that's how I met you, was doing some of that stuff, doing some of the shows around here. And yeah, now it's taken on a whole new life.
Yeah. It's, when we had you here at the theater, you could, look back and listen to how you got to where you are now. You can see all that, all that time in performing at that theater probably really shaped your show now. And being especially in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there's so many players and great players. There's just that hub alone can keep you busy for a very, very long time. And obviously, there's people who just don't even really leave Texas because it's so big.
No, that's true.
Yeah, they just play Texas. No one knows them outside of Texas, but they're stars within Texas. So, it's a neat hotbed for entertainers and musicians, and almost like Nashville would be, or but more organic, because they're actually, most of the time, there are people who are actually born and raised in Texas, and they haven't moved from all over the country to pursue their dream in Nashville. That's right. It's a homegrown type of thing. So I'm sure you have plenty of long friendships with tons of musicians in that area. Of course, I've run into several people we've had here at the theater, or I've been on tour, and they're from Texas. Oh yeah, do you know Michael Hix? Oh yeah, I know Michael Hix.
That guy's crazy.
Yeah.
No, it's so funny. We when was it? It was last September. No, it was last October. Last year. The boys and I, we were doing a show. I'm a part of a nonprofit organization known as Tribute to Valor Foundation, we work with the Medal of Honor Foundation and several other, Gary Sinise Foundation. We work with several different parties. Yeah. Anyways, we did our first big fundraiser, our big gala, our big event last year, and we were performing at it along with Lee Greenwood. And Lee Greenwood just came in. I want to say he was doing a show in New Mexico the night before. Yeah. And his band, he was just coming by himself, and he was going to do tracks. And so I got on the phone with because I put together a lot of the entertainment for this foundation. Yeah. And so I got on the phone with his music director, and I just said, hey, why don't, if Mr. Green would enjoy playing with the band, I've got a 7-piece band that, and I told him all the players, because his music director lived in Nashville. Yeah. So I told him all the players that were in my band, and he's like, oh, I know this person. Oh, I know that person. It's just funny how everybody's kind of connected in some way. So he goes, yeah, I'll tell Lee that you've got a great band. So Lee came in, and he played with my band for that event. And the night before, whenever he was in New Mexico, he came back and he said, I played with a group. I think it was some horse or it was a horse convention, or it was some sort of rodeo type thing that they were playing at. Yeah. And he goes, the band that I worked with last night, they said they know you. And I was like, who was it? And so he started mentioning the players, and they were guys here from Dallas-Fort Worth that I'd known for years and booked and worked with. So that's funny that you said that. You're like, oh yeah, I know Michael Hix. So I was thinking, hey, Lee Greenwood knows who Michael Hix is, but I don't know who you are, Lee. Oh yeah, you're the guy with all those hits. That's right.
That guy. Yeah. So
that guy.
So performing now, what type of gigs are your favorite to do now? I know you could do really a wide variety of everything from theaters to casinos to kind of cool club dates to whatever you can, convention work. You kind of you fit into a lot of different places. What's your kind of favorite venue or type of style place to play now?
Yeah, nowadays, wow. I was trying to think. 2016, we did 172 shows, which was for being just an independent person. I don't necessarily have a full-time agent that I work with. But we did, yeah, exactly kind of what you said, everything from clubs to corporate to private to weddings to casinos to concerts to theaters. We did a lot of openings for some, a lot of notable acts.
Yeah.
But for me, my favorite type of venue to perform at is in theaters. I love just the theaters because to me it's more like a home. And I guess because I was on a theater type production with a stage, the theater that we had here in Arlington was 1,100 seats.
Yeah. And
so to me, just being in that type of a concert setting is my favorite.
Yeah.
And just because of the energy and the, people in those type of venues, if people are there, they've spent their hard-earned money or the money they are there to see you. They want to see you. They're paying money to see you, as opposed to, I'm at a club and I paid a cheap cover charge, but I'm paying a cover charge so I can get in and get food or drinks or, because my buddies are here.
Yeah.
Just that performance. And so we do a lot of casinos, and depending on the rooms that we're at the casinos, those are great. Those are fun. But a lot of times you may run into, we want to go gamble or we got to go do this. But for me, the theaters are my favorite.
Yeah. The people there to see you and there's no other distractions. And, it's a great spot for you. Here's a question. For someone who doesn't have songs on the radio or a big hit, it's a different thing for you because you have to go in and you're playing a lot of places where people come in and do have big hits.
Oh yeah.
How do you find, is that something you still think you would want to strive for, or you kind of feel like you've found your stride and this is where you should be?
Oh no, I love it. And that's a great question, because I have been, since, and kind of my theme throughout this entire interview so far has been, I've been fortunate to where I've kind of been a chameleon. I've relied on my strengths from a performance aspect and kind of bonding with a crowd and reading a crowd to where, okay, I can do country music. Okay, now I can do pop music. You want metal? I can do metal. I can do rock. I can do rap. And I kind of for the past several years, I've always based my performance on my crowd and being able to read a crowd and just go in any particular direction at the right time. And so that's been great, but it's also made it extremely difficult for me from a commercial standpoint, is because now as my career continues to grow, I've kind of started developing some different relationships out in Nashville, out in California, with some different management groups and some different talent agencies and some different labels that have shown interest in what I do. But the main question has always been, well, we think you're great. We think you're one of the most entertaining people we have ever seen.
Yeah.
But we don't know how to sell you.
Yeah.
Because you're a little bit of everything. So what are you? And I've always tried to tell them, I'm an entertainer. Well, that's beyond question. But unfortunately, we live in a world that you have to sell a particular product. You can't sell, this was the best analogy that I could give. If you ever gone into a restaurant where there's like 40 different pages of, they serve everything from Asian food to American food to poutine. They're serving everything. They're going back left and right. Have you ever kind of one of
you're
those,
like the
it makes you a little.
You're like the Cheesecake Factory of artists.
It's exactly. I'm the Cheesecake Factory of musicians, of a singers. And so it's like, okay, I get that. Now I truly get that. So I've had to do some soul searching myself over this past, and really it's been over this past year, is trying to figure out, Michael, you've been great to work a lot. And that's why I'm also, it's very scary, because I have been working a lot, but I've been doing shows that have either kind of been thematic, like, okay, for example, when we came out and did your show, it was more of a Texas comes to the Walters Theater. Yeah. And, I did throw in my Canadian medley, but we did a lot of great stuff that were based from artists out of Texas. Yeah. I've got a Motown show that's extremely successful right now, that we're doing a lot of, just the hits of Motown. I've got a show that's called The History of Rock and Roll, which pretty much tells how music changed from 1955 up through 1985. So I've always kind of had to pick a theme, but that's only going to get me so far. Yeah. So now I've always done this, I've just never incorporated into my shows. I'm doing a lot of writing. And so songwriting, lyrics, just doing everything. And I'm starting to find, through my writing, I'm starting to find my niche. And a lot of my niche is coming back is with the type of music that I grew up listening to, at least that my parents were listening to. I've just always found fondness in music from, mid to late 50s all the way up through, mid 70s. Yeah. So in my writing style and in my original songs, that's kind of where I'm sticking. I'm always like to say it's kind of a Stax Records meets Sun Records. There's some of those rockabilly, I guess, notes, rockabilly tones, the vibe in a lot of my tunes, but it also, it's got a lot of that soulful Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, it's got a lot of that Stax kind of soul to it as well. So, and plus the way that we've just been in the studio doing an EP, and even like the way that we're mixing it, the way that we're doing it, the way that we're putting it together, it sounds like a song, or it sounds like a record, a project of stuff that came out of that era. Yeah. And so I love it. I feel like that kind of gives me a niche. So now I can incorporate my original tunes with other songs from that same type of genre, or, whether it be taking a cover tune or doing something and kind of putting my own little spin on it to where it all sounds cohesive. Now I'm kind of finding, all right, Michael, here's your niche. Here is the Michael Hix sound. And that's been very, very difficult for me, but I've got people that are interested, hopefully it's not just blowing smoke, but people that are interested in saying, okay, if we got a way that we can sell you, we'll sell you. We just need to figure out how to sell you. Yeah. So that's kind of trying to be a chameleon for so long has been great. But now that I'm trying to step outside of just being known as, hey, that's the guy that covers this, or that's the guy, because I don't want people, there's nothing wrong with it, but I've never been, even in my own shows, I've never been an impersonator. I may do an Elvis song, and I may throw a little, may do something like that, but I'm not trying to be an Elvis impersonator. Yeah. That's just me paying tribute to one of my influences. I may do a Michael Jackson song, and I may do the moonwalk and do all this, but I'm not a Michael Jackson impersonator. I'm just doing my own tribute in a warped way, my tribute to these particular artists. But I've been doing that for so long, a lot of people have gotten confused. Oh, well, that's the guy that does all the impersonation. No, I'm not really doing impersonations. I'm performing.
Some people
I'm entertaining you.
Just don't know how to say it properly. But I know what you're meaning. But it's. I know we've had this conversation too. About where to place you. Because you do so many things. It's almost as if, it's kind of like a modern day Wayne Newton type, if you want to say that. Yeah. Where it's hard to place, like you say, well, if you didn't know who Wayne Newton was and you were going to say, we're going to go see Wayne Newton. Well, who is he? And you're like, well, he's this Las Vegas guy who does all these different styles of music and plays a bunch of instruments, I guess. That was one of his things, but it's hard to place him. But he had built a following there in Vegas, and they built up that name. But that's hard, and as someone who books shows and stuff, and I know the same thing with you. It's just, I always thought, well, it's one of the best shows I've ever seen. Same question: how do you sell it? Because when people get in the seats, they're like, "Wow, this is amazing. This is great." But you have to get them in the seats first of all,
right?
And it becomes difficult, like you said, when you're kind of a master of so many different things, and it's not something you really want to probably yourself. You do your Motown show and different things like that. But I know people probably who know Michael Hix and come out almost, they still want to see all this other stuff, right? And you probably in your mind to some degree would love to kind of narrow it down, but you're able to do so many other different things. It must be, when you're doing a Motown show, it must be hard not to want to throw in all this other stuff because it's something you're so used to doing and probably really enjoy. But when you expand and look at different things, you really, unfortunately, I think, have to narrow things down. I think once you narrow it down and people come to see that, then you can come back with a whole pile of different things and different offerings within the show. But I know exactly where you're coming from. And
the struggle's real. The struggle is real.
Yeah.
But no, so that's, I mean, you hit it right on the head. This is a new chapter in my life because I'm now trying to transition from, Michael Hix, the guy that does everything, as to Michael Hix, the original artist with this particular show. And I'm not saying, I mean, to me nowadays, unless you've got this is just my opinion, but unless you've got a label or if you've got a lot of money behind you, it's very difficult to break into on a national, international level, very difficult to break into that particular scene.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, with internet and with computer and YouTube and all this other stuff, there are other markets, there's other ways to try to do that and monetize it. But even that is still, for me, in my opinion, still kind of questionable because you see a bunch of YouTube stuff and you know that there are people out there that they can buy views for YouTube. They can buy stuff for this or that. And so that kind of gets a little questionable, but trying to sell myself as just an original artist, I think it's not impossible, but it's very difficult. So I still will be doing, some of my, like I was saying, some covers, but doing them in my own style, in my own vein, and still working on putting together that show and that performance that makes me different. Like, for example, part of the stuff in my Motown show that I'm doing now, I throw in one of my originals, but you hear it and people are like, "Oh, who did that song?" Because it sounds like it came from that era.
Yeah.
And then just finally say, "No, that's my new tune. It's going to be out on my EP that comes out." And people are like, "Oh, hey, that was great," and they love it. So just kind of trying to slowly work that stuff in there and see if anything hits.
Yeah, it's a super great idea, and I think it's almost as if you're in a 10-year cycle type of thing where you're in the high school band and you transition to doing the theater for 10 years, and then you were doing your Michael Hix for kind of like 10 years, and now you seem to be not on purpose, but I think everything kind of rotates in that kind of cycle where you get to a certain extent and it's like, okay, I have to rethink this and redo it. And mostly because, I mean, you get more mature and you understand things more and more as you get older, but the crowd still changes, right?
Oh yeah.
They're all, from when you started to where you are now, they're all, 20, 30 years older than they were. Yeah. So I think also as a, for me too, buying shows, I'm buying way different things than I did 10, 15 years ago, just because the crowd all changes. All of a sudden you've got people who were in their 20s and 30s now in, their 50s and 60s who now don't want to go to a club. They don't want to go to any place super loud. They want to go see a great show at a great theater and have that type of experience. But they're a different crowd than those same people were 20 years ago. Completely have to adapt all the time if you want.
Well, and that's where I think Oh no, I agree with you, and that's where I think I'm kind of headed at this point. Is it's another adaptation, trying to I guess not reinvent the wheel, but reinvent myself to where I have, if I'm going to be, because I mean, and you've seen the way that I perform. I'm all over the dancing. I mean, I'm all over the place doing stuff, which is great. But I also realize, okay, Michael, how much longer are you going to be able to hold physically, and keep your sanity? How much longer are you going to be able to continue to do everything at that particular level?
Yeah.
Without, I mean, if I'm just continuing to go, and if I'm not making the right steps to put myself in bigger, better venues or in front of bigger audiences and trying to progress, how I'm not going to be able to hold out. So I have to strategically make those decisions on what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and if I'm if I'm making decisions and playing at the venues that are leading me to where I initially want to go.
Yeah. And also a great thing about you've been super successful without having to rely on having an agent. Or manager or any of those type of things. And I think, that's really great. I mean, a lot of people can't do that. And I'm probably, once again, back to those years at the theater there and helping booking and getting all that education, prepared you for looking after all your own gigs, and you've been doing that for years. But I think too, for someone like you, being with an agent or a manager can really pigeonhole yourself as well. You're able to make your own decisions. You kind of guide yourself to where you want to go, and I think it's a perfect way for you to handle your situation. It works really well for you.
And it had, for the past, like I said, we left the theater in 2013. So for the past almost 6 years, it really has. It has been a blessing because I have, now there are several, agents or people that we'll talk with on helping us out, but being in control of where we go, where we don't go, what we play, what we don't play, that really has been a blessing. And my wife, she's Angel, bless her heart. She's done a majority of that work for us. She's been the one that's been putting together the contracts and sending out stuff and doing stuff. It's a 2-man show. Jenny doing that, and I'll be making the phone calls and sending out emails. And so we've been very fortunate to do that together. But on the flip side, it's kind of this adaptation now, what we've been talking about, kind of where I feel like my career is going now. I would not mind working with an agent in hopes, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this EP project. When I say an agent or management of sorts, just because I'm trying to get into different venues more instead of just being we've done national stuff, but I'm trying to put together more national, international tours, trips, performances.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, and this, everybody knows this. I'm sure everybody that listens to the podcast, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. And I feel like I need to find the right team that would be willing to take a look, sell me as a product, sell my show or whatever, to kind of help along putting in those venues and in those places that I may necessarily can't get into myself with a phone call.
Yeah. Yeah, because it can be.
I'm always looking for that.
It can be a little awkward as the guy who's after the show calling in to talk about yourself, because literally that's what you're doing.
Yeah, how's your show? I'm telling you, I am awesome. You guys would not believe how good I am. I need to be at your place.
Yeah, but if anyone who could do it, you can do it. I mean, that's the great thing. So looking down the road, like 10 years from now, you looking that far ahead, or where you want to be at that stage?
Oh, no, always.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always looking. I've kind of got what I'm calling my end game.
Yeah.
My end game, if I were to say in the next 15 to 20 years, I'm going to be on television. I want my own television show. That's kind of my end game. Similar, whether it be a talk show like The Tonight Show, or, I know Harry Connick Jr. has a show now. that he incorporates a lot of his music, but he also has guests on. So my end game is television, and the reason I've always said I want my end game to be television, it's because I feel like that gives me still the opportunity to perform on a bigger scale, to reach a wider audience, but it gives me the most longevity. I don't have to be doing this and acting crazy and traveling and performing and doing, so that's kind of my end game. So I look at that and I think, okay, let's work it backwards. Yeah. Where do you go from there? How do you go where you are now to get there in the next 15 to 20 years? So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is take my initial steps. What I'm trying to do with my show is I'm incorporating, of course, also my original stuff with cover tunes or whatever, trying to create my own 90-minute show and start booking that in places and building that following more on not just a regional but a national level, to where I've kind of got my own following, to where I can make that transition easier into television. So, because by that time people, oh yeah, that's Michael Hix, so that's the performer, that's the singer. Oh, now he's got a show.
Yeah, that's great.
That's the long-term goal, because I started looking at. I'll just use Jimmy Fallon, for example. He's got the Tonight Show. Jimmy Fallon. He started out as a stand-up comedian, and he was doing stand-up comedy and traveling and doing the clubs and making people laugh. And then he got into writing, and made a break and got into Saturday Night Live and started doing all this stuff. And now he's the host of the Tonight Show. So he started out, doing the comedy, the comedy scene, and that's the best way that I can, the easiest thing I can equate it to is somebody like a Jimmy Fallon or a Jerry Seinfeld or, Jim Carrey. They started out doing the clubs, doing the casinos, doing, theaters, doing bigger things. And then eventually they were performing enough. They got more of a well-known audience and recognition. And when the opportunity hit for them to either do something on television or make it a movie, or they took the opportunity and ran with it. Yeah. And then they made something of themselves. So
yeah, that's
kind of the initial goal.
That makes perfect sense. A couple questions I always like to kind of finish up on. Obviously, you've played in a lot of different places all over the place. Do you have a bucket list of a couple places that you want to perform at? I know I always have certain places out there. So I'd love to do a show at the Hollywood Bowl or something like that. But do you have any on your list that you're dying to play at?
I would love to, just because it's so nostalgic, I'd love to play Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. I'd
love to do, to me, that would be nostalgic. I'd like to do that. Other than that, beggars aren't choosers. I'll play wherever I can play.
Yeah.
But that would be a bucket list. I'd love to do a lot of things overseas, do a couple of big shows overseas, maybe in London and Australia, and look at a couple of those places. But here, I know in the States, definitely Madison Square Garden. And then there's a place that, oh man, if you've never been, the Walters Dinner Theater, there's a place right outside. That's the other one.
Yeah, but you've done that one already. That's off your bucket list. Yeah.
I've done that one. Well, yeah, but I'm sure there's been some new foliage planted, and there's been some. I've seen the guy that the groundskeeper there, and man, talk about a job.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be here today or the last couple of days. It's been snowing, and it's been ice and the usual crap up here. But it's nice in the summertime, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, oh it's beautiful.
So if people want to reach out and find out more about Michael Hix and see where you're performing and all that stuff, what's the best way to reach out and get in touch with you?
No, that's great. Website, Michael Hix, spelled Hix, michaelhixmusic.com. I'm on Facebook. I think it's at Michael Hix Holla, Holla, is my Facebook tag. And then on Instagram at Michael D. Hix, Hix. And then I want to say Twitter is at Michael D. Hix as well.
Yeah. Good.
I believe.
And
all my social media stuff is on my website as well. Oh, yeah. You can follow all the tags and the links and everything.
Yeah. It's been a great chat, and I feel like I know you a lot better now. I wish you all the best success, and hopefully we get to work together again real soon. And
it'll be a pleasure.
Yeah, it's like if anyone out there ever have a chance to go see Michael Hix, make sure you do. It's one of the, as I mentioned, one of the greatest shows I've ever seen, and super, super entertaining. And you really, really enjoy it. So I really thank you for spending this time and hanging out and catching up. And I hope we get to hang out and do that again soon.
Man, I appreciate it, Aaron. Honestly, thanks for thinking of me to do this podcast. It's been a treat. I hope it's continued to be successful for you, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.